And welcome to Mapping the College Audition, a podcast where we explore the landscape of the college theater world and try to demystify this daunting audition process. I'm your host, Charlie Murphy, director of MTCA, that's Musical Theater College Auditions. And today we've got a beautifully composed pop MT crossover of a show lined up for you. Joey Contreras is on the pod today. Joey is an amazing composer slash lyricist slash artist. And we really get into a lot of stuff today. We talk about him kind of finding his community of where he fits in college. We talk about him having trained in acting and how that really feeds his musicality in his songwriting now. We talk a bit about experiencing resistance to contemporary sound within musical theater programs, and how a lot of that shifted when he started putting some of his work on YouTube. We get deep into his songwriting process. We talk about working with a lyricist and how that collaboration works. We talk a bit about handing over singing to other artists when it's sometimes time to hear other people sing your songs. We talk about the process of creating a musical from scratch and how that works. Joey gives you the reminder, all of you out there, to try to buy the sheet music of composers. It's a great way to support them. And then, of course, you would expect that we got deep into the metaverse at the end of the pod. So if you want to get into our thoughts on the metaverse, listen through the end. But Meghan, before we get in with Joey, how are you doing today?
Great. I was so excited for this episode today. I know we were talking about our upcoming guests. We're very excited, but I was also very particularly excited to see Joey. We talked about it a little bit in the episode of his rise to fandom in like the YouTube era. And I was very much one of those young MT kids. And I was just excited to meet him.
We give Meghan full props that she did not overly fangirl in this episode. She told me after, she was like, I was really trying hard not to. And I think you did great. You never would have known. You thought I was just professional. That's what you gave us. We'll see if all of you cannot fangirl as you listen to this episode with Joey Contreras. Well, we are honored to have Joey Contreras on the pod today. Joey went to the University of the Arts. He got a BFA in musical theater. He went to NYU Graduate Musical Theater Writing Program, our second NYU Grad MT Writing guest. He is now a musical theater and pop songwriter. He's known for his 4 studio albums, Love Me, Love Me Not, Young Kind of Love. This guy likes to write about love. Joyride and In Pieces, a new musical. He's also written musicals with book writer, lyricist Kate Thomas. All the Kids Are Doing It, Forget Me Not, Elements, and he is the composer of Heartbreakers in Hell. He's also written music for the Walt Disney Company and is a Fred Ebb Award finalist and a Jonathan Larson Grant finalist. My gosh, so much finalists in your
always a bridesmaid, apparently.
Always a bridesmaid. Well, that is fair. And he also teaches at universities and theater programs worldwide. So we're so honored to have you on. Joey, welcome. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. I'm happy to be here. I told you earlier I didn't have a cup of coffee yet. So, if any moment I sound crazy, just steer me in the right direction.
Yeah, that right direction, there'll be a Starbucks. We'll take a quick break. We run to the Starbucks. No, but I'd love to start with, your beginnings. And we see this really fun path that you took of going BFA MT into more composition. Tell me about that 16, 17-year-old self when you kind of started this process and you were thinking about what you wanted in a career. Was it already the seeds of maybe a multi-hyphenate? Did you think at the time, I just want to be an actor, a singer? Is there anything, in terms of that 16, 17-year-old, like, do you remember what your goals were in a college experience?
Absolutely, yeah. A friend of mine, I remember in high school, told me that she was envious of me because I knew exactly what path I wanted to go on for right away, immediately. And she told me that in a school bus. And it was because I was very actively pursuing music and theater already in high school. I had started doing music and theater and dance when I was 4 years old, actually. I was doing a lot of community theater. I was writing a lot of music, locking myself into our little home studio, writing music because my parents were musicians. So I was around a lot of music and theater and pop music growing up. I always tell people that I wasn't like raised into church musically. My like vocabulary music wise was like Paula Abdul and Janet Jackson and Michael Jackson, and then that evolved to like the TRL generation of Britney and NSYNC and all of that. So that's very much embedded in me. And then when I was getting ready for college, it was that kind of moment of like, okay, am I going to go to school for music or am I going to go to school for theater?
Hmm. And there must have been a part of you that said, I also might want to be on Broadway, or I also might want to be a performer, an actor, or was that always the idea of MT was always to potentially be a writer of MT?
Well, no, I mean, honestly, the idea was always to be a male Britney Spears.
Mm,
That was
think about it.
the real goal. And so I truly wrote like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pop songs from the age, I mean, I still consider myself writing pop songs, but like around 12, 13 years old is when I really started to record a lot of music and write a lot of music. I perform it at like county fairs and things like that. And my mom was like, we're going to copyright all this stuff. You're going to be a star. and, and so, yeah, but while I was writing all that music, I was still acting and performing. I kind of hinted at this earlier, but it's interesting because it's like the main reason why I ultimately pursued, like when it came to like the college moment, the reason why I pursued theater was because at that time, especially back when I was considering college, I felt more like a theater kid than I felt like a jazz musician. And when the possibility of going to like Berklee School of Music, which was where I was going to go before I decided to go to a BFA musical theater program, at that time, especially pop music, the kind of pop music that I was into, like Britney, was not necessarily, it was sort of fluff, and it wasn't, deconstructed and appreciated in ways that we talk about music now. We still were very much like narrow-minded when it came to genre. And so I felt like and this might have been completely wrong, but but I also think that it was in the air of the time. But in that moment in time, I just felt like, oh, if I'm going to Berklee School of Music, I'm gonna feel like I have to like fit in with the jazz musicians or with the Jimi Hendrix guitar playing kind of groups, and I felt more like a theater kid who loved pop music.
I love that. And I want to stay on this for a second, if, not to make you totally explore a hypothetical path that you didn't take, but I'm fascinated by that because I think many people choose acting and musical theater BFAs when it seems like the goal isn't necessarily Broadway or even TV and film acting. I think partially because of lack of other options to that point, that like, one of my classmates at Carnegie Mellon dropped out, I guess never became a classmate, though she wanted to be a pop singer, but had applied to be a BFA MT person. It was sort of like it was either that or don't go to college. It seemed like was her options. And it feels like we sometimes still have students who do that, where they'll end up looking at a BFA MT degree or a BM maybe in MT, as opposed to like, I guess, would you consider today, if you went back to school, would you consider getting a pop degree? There now are programs where you can study pop music, but does that feel like not as realistic a path? Or I guess I wonder why that calculation will happen sometimes. The converse would be sometimes people say like, I want to be a TikTok star, and they'll get an acting degree. I'm like, well, because you can't get a degree in TikTok, I guess, yet, but soon enough.
I think I would have, I say this without any sort of regrets. I think I would have done something different, me being who I am now, but also it would have to be like still kind of in the landscape that we're in now too, or at least, I don't know. I think so much of, I think I was really influenced by wanting to feel comfortable and feel like I was around people that were like me, and I wanted to feel like, and I don't know if I never felt like the cool kid. And for some reason, again, it might have been me projecting, but at that age, I felt like, oh, because I was also self-taught and I wasn't like noodling on the guitar like crazy or playing classical music or playing jazz chords and everything, I felt strangely inferior and not cool. And but I also was going for, I was going to be going for vocal performance and songwriting. And it's so interesting, but it's like interesting because I think back on that now and I feel like that was sort of like, Joey, I want like younger Joey to know that, like, to have a little bit more confidence and
Uh-huh.
a little bit more, I don't know, not even belief in himself, because I've always been very determined and driven. I
Yeah.
think it really came down to like a little bit of fear and a little bit of like wanting to fit in somewhere that felt
It
like me.
totally makes sense.
You know?
We talk about it a lot on the pod about you can't just give confidence to a 17-year-old, even if you know that's what they need. But it's like, in some ways, the community of a theater school and community of the theater world may have helped give Bowie some of that. And of course, maybe aging, all those things. But I'm jumping ahead because I want to talk about MT and pop more as we get later. But first, just tell me a little bit about the Uarts experience. What was it like for you? What were those? Tell me about those 4 years, and then we'll get into your professional career as well.
Well, the best thing to come out of my UX experience has been my friendships, my best friends. So they're still my best friends to this day. And so, yeah, my experience at UArts was wonderful because it gave me them. And it also gave me an opportunity, honestly, because of my friendships and because of the person who I am. I do credit a lot of my um, seeds of musical theater writing coming from the fact that I was driven and my friends were driven and very talented, and I got us into a practice room, and they were so collaborative in wanting to learn new music. And
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't at all part of the curriculum at UArts. I was kind of creating my own path, and my friends were there that were supportive and encouraging and were talented.
Mm-hmm.
So at UArts, I think the education was very good. I think for anybody who is, a storyteller in any sort of medium, I think learning and training in various formats is really important. I think being trained as an actor has been um, paramount in my writing.
Mm-hmm.
It's what I write from. I write more from the idea of an acting and intention and subtext than I do from what harmonic shifts are going to be cool and you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I am very grateful for my experience at UArts, and there's of course that with any program there's the um, politics of things, and I experienced those absolutely. And if we want to go into that, we can go into that.
We may go into some of the politics, but first, I'd love to just talk a little bit because I kind of missed it in the 16, 17-year-old portion. What was your relationship like with your parents as you're making these decisions, especially as you're kind of choosing between schools? And I know Mama Contreras is like patenting all the songs, of course, trying to
It's
make the money. But what was that like in terms of, did they have votes? Were they just totally open to it? How were they supportive in terms of finances, et
so
cetera?
so supportive, so encouraging. I've been very lucky to have had parents who sacrificed so much to allow me to have the education that I have received, and yeah, since day one, honestly, since day one.
And they didn't have a strong vote of, no, you have to go one way or you have to do the other. It was whatever you want to do.
No, it was very much my choice. Yeah.
The dream of dreams. What about, so now let's get into your arts. If you were to go back and maybe change something, or specifically if there's is there a class that you would teach? Is there something that you would adjust about the program if you could go back, maybe especially for a student like you, if you were to retake the program, what would you tweak or what would you add?
I think that, again, the landscape of everything is just so different now. And I think that it was just starting to turn when I was graduating. And then it's only gotten more and more less conventional and untraditional.
Hmm.
And I think that for musical theater performers, I think that there's always a curiosity about either writing or hunger to be involved in the development of something.
Hmm.
And so I think that there is room and space for that to be encouraged and supported and provided as an elective of some kind. Uh, I think it's also just as it's important for, I think, writers to train as an actor or take
Mm-hmm.
some acting lessons. I think, it would be interesting to have more actors learn about what a writer bakes into a song or, a scene.
I think I know what you mean when you say it's become less conventional and less traditional. But maybe for our parents out there who are not quite as versed on the what the business was and what it's becoming or what it has become, what do you kind of mean in terms of it's less traditional, it's less conventional than it used to be?
I think that the paths have there's so many more paths, and I think they just like spread all over,
Hmm.
and the path to whatever um, wherever your the end and the destination that you think you want
Hmm.
is very there's so many different paths to get there, and there's so many paths to new destinations that we didn't know
Hmm.
about. And my journey in my life continues to be an example of that. I think that sometimes when people are like, "Did you accomplish all of your dreams?" I still have a lot of goals that I want to achieve, and
Hmm.
I've done so many things I never dreamed about doing. And so I think that the fact that the landscape is that kind of landscape now, with the increase in technology and social media and the conversations that we're having, it just has allowed a lot more possibilities for um, different paths.
Hmm. Right. You're not waiting for a producer to cast you in a Broadway show to necessarily make success.
You have different so many different results available to you now, and um, and I think that that's an exciting thing. It's an exciting thing, and it can be overwhelming though too.
Totally. So talk to me about so in your path. So you're out of UArts. What's the timing then before you get into NYU graduate writing?
So yeah, the senior year of college, I had really started turning these very personal, diaristic type songs of my life into more theatricalized storytelling, musical theater, standalone pieces, and and had thrown it up into kind of a song cycle format. I was working with a playwright writing major. He was a screenwriting major. Um,
Screenplay writing. We got it. It's all the same.
yeah. And we were kind of working on a piece, and and this is all stuff that like I just was telling the department I would like the studio to do this, and I was kind of I hate in a way I was sort of pioneering this kind of path
Mm-hmm.
for this bubble for the Uarts community.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure just like Benj and Justin were doing the same for where they were at UMich, I believe. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think that this was happening in many colleges. Um, and uh, and so I had told one of the like I had gotten a mentor, one of the faculty members. I was like, I really love your help because again, self-taught. I was like, I need your help. Like, I need to know how to notate my music. Can you just
Mm-hmm.
look this over for me? And Owen Robbins, I'll give him a shout out.
Hey, Owen.
He was very helpful to me and really encouraging. And I did get some pushback from faculty. I remember some faculty were actually, and were kind of like, I think it was mainly because of the contemporary musical theater sound.
Mm-hmm.
They were resistant to the contemporary musical theater sound. And so I was kind of fighting against that and having to like boost my own self up, and my friends were also boosting me up. And then I started putting stuff on YouTube. And
Mm-hmm.
once I started putting things on YouTube, everything really, I won't say fully crystallized, but things started to really pick up traction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when they say you say resistant to the contemporary musical theater sound, that's in your writing. They're saying this is not good. You should write it differently, a different sounding way. Or do they mean you as a singer, you as a performer, you
I
should
think
be
that they just
singing more differently?
I think they just didn't. I think it wasn't their taste.
Hmm.
you know?
Fair.
I think it's just like some programs are I think this is also because of the landscape and because of what the scores that are being produced and the things that are happening now. The faculty and the educators, who are all wonderful, have had to adapt to teaching mixing, teaching belting,
Mm-hmm.
teaching, styles that are just different than a different generation and era of musical theater.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's what I mean when I started writing things that were very rhythmic. And I'm not saying that like I'm being some like groundbreaking, brilliant person, but like there was it was just a different, groove and feel and vibe and style that they were
Totally.
like, ah,
But so then it was pretty quick from UArts to NYU. Was it immediate senior year and then next year you're at NYU?
pretty quick. I mean, I like, I got my equity card. I did a couple
Mm-hmm.
productions. I moved to New York. I went on a couple auditions there. And I was, within my first 3 or 4 months of being in the city, I did Concert of the Duplex. I was like, here's my music. And then I started throwing myself into my first album about 2 months after that. So I started recording my first album. And then my 1 year anniversary being in New York, I started NYU's grad program.
Amazing. And tell me about that program. So we heard a little bit about it from Joel, but tell me about like what your experience was. Was this now giving you more of the thing that you had wanted from previous, from the Uarts experience of, oh, this is everything I want in terms of a writing playground? Or tell me about it. Yeah, what was
And
that?
the grad program, as Joel must have told you, is like an unbelievable playground. And it's also like such a pressure cooker that should be put in a reality show somehow. It's like so much emotions and hard work.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of work. I mean, the program sets you up for like the worst case scenario of any sort of writing moment where like
Mm-hmm.
suddenly it's like the night, I don't know why this would happen, but like the night before opening you need a brand new opening number and it needs to be like
That's what Joel made it sound like. Like, go downstairs right now, write it. It's coming up at the end of class. I'm like, oh my God, that sounds so stressful.
I know. I remember one of my first classes with Bill Finn. I thought this is my first year, and like maybe the first second week, I thought that Bill's lyric class, where he would give prompts and then the lyricists would read their lyrics, and if he liked one, he would ask any composers in the room if they wanted to set the lyric.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like a 3 hour class or something like that. And like maybe in the first half of the class, he was like reading the lyrics. The first half of the class, some lyrics were being read, and he liked one. And I raised my hand to set one, and oh my god, I immediately left the room to then start setting it, thinking that I needed to come back up in that 3 hour period with a fully set song. So
Oh
I
my.
up like 10 minutes left of the thing. I was like, I wrote the song. And he was like, oh, it was like, you could
You
have
could have
had,
noodled a
you could
bit. It could have been a little bit, just some ideas.
yeah, yeah. So it wasn't like that intense, but there were also nights where, you would be collaborating with someone um, and you had lab at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday and you didn't get a lyric from your um, person until Monday, like at midnight.
Uh-huh.
So yeah.
Oof. So tell me a little bit about the grad school experience in terms of like, is it like college where you're like, this is my job, this is all I'm doing? Or are you also like bartending a night of the week and figuring like, especially in New York City, I think sometimes people talk about the temptations of, but I'm also going to be producing this thing and doing other things. Or was it really, this is these couple of years I'm in this mode?
They said right away, they were like, this is going to become your life for the next 2 years. And I didn't believe it. And I'm someone who always multitasks and puts a lot of stuff on my plate. So when grad school had begun, I was wrapping up my album. I was releasing my album. I was doing a Joe's Pub concert, started a new relationship.
Hmm.
And, but at the same time, while I did all of that, I also feel like it's this really weird, like, dead zone of my life where I feel like I was like blacked out. Like I
Mm-hmm.
feel like when I think about that time, I just think about literally sleeping on a bed full of sheet music. Like my bed was just a comforter full of sheet music that I was just.
And I'm guessing that's abnormal. That's not what you do every night.
That's not me no, that's not how it is now. Trying to save a couple more trees.
I like it. I like it. Okay, let's cue to a short break. And on the back end, we're going to talk a lot about sort of your work as a composer and all the magic that we know about composition. Okay, so we are back with Joey Contreras, and I'm going to ask one of the hardest questions, or maybe least fair questions to ask a composer or a creative person, which is like, where do you come up with your ideas? Because I think as a non-musical writer person, like I have this romantic idea that things just kind of come into your head, and then you put them somehow with your fingers onto a piano or into music. Is that true, or do you have a discovery mechanism where you said noodling a bit to make things happen, or how do you take the idea and even like language wise, I'd love to kind of hear like what does an idea sound like, or how does an idea translate into your brain before it becomes music? So that's a big open-ended question I throw at you.
It is magic. It is magic. I think for a long time I look at dancers and fierce singers having such a superpower. When I see, when you hear someone like singing and they've got that tone and they have that range, and when you see a dancer, so you think you can dance or whatever, like I'm always like, that's such a superpower. It's magical. But then I realized, you know what? I have literally create music where there was nothing there, and create sound when there was nothing there, and I create melody and harmony and story, and so it's I think that's kind of how it is. I'm constantly coming up with song concepts. A lot of them tend to be inspired by things that are happening in my life. I listen to the world with a different set of ears. I'm always listening for song concept ideas. I'm in a conversation with friends. They might say something a certain way that I find really unique, and I will have to write it down. I will be coming back from the gym and with my husband, and will need to make him walk ahead of me because I have a song idea and want to record my voice memo, and I'm too shy and embarrassed to like have him hear me humming and gibberish stuff in my phone.
And at that point, are you humming melodies? Are you like? Because I think I can kind of conceptualize, despite not really being a musical person, how you could come up with a melody. What I'm so amazed by is how you do all of it. All the different. Okay, that's the melody line. Here's what's happening with the instruments, and this other instrument's doing this, and here's the da da da. Like, does that all happen at once, or is it you add them all layered, one on top of each other?
Kind of depends, but I mean, like if I'm thinking of something and I'm just like da na 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 da na 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 na, whatever that was, I don't know what it is.
I'm in. I love that song.
Da na 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 na.
Okay.
That's like, and then you can go from there, and maybe it's like you hear a guitar and it's like that kind of thing, or it's just like a full open pad. It's like dun 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 dun. It's all of that stuff. It really depends on arrangement, and it happens differently for everybody, but and it depends on the song. But that's kind of what's going through my mind constantly. And I don't know how any of that's going to sound to the audience listening to this. But yeah, it's a combination of everything. And I also, again, my process is not writing notes on a page and figuring out how everything fits into a certain key or chord. I write very viscerally, very much just from myself, and I throw it all onto a voice memo, or I throw it all onto Logic and stack a bunch of harmonies that I feel inspired by, figure out some kind of figure, and then take a look at it and be like, okay, do I like this? And if I like this, then I will go through the tedious process of notating it, or or tweak from there. So
if you need us to send back what from the podcast, what you just did there, if that's going to end up somewhere, please just let us know. We'll encapsulate that for you if you want to write some music to that.
Right.
I'm ready.
we're in the same room, so now we're all co-writers, basically.
Yeah, oh yeah, I get a credit. No, I get a credit. Yeah, for sure, for sure. I love that you mentioned a bit about at least at NYU Grad how it worked. But is that same process how it normally works for you, working with a lyricist, that they will come up with lyrics first and then you will write, or does it work differently? Does it go back and forth? I know you worked with a couple times with Kate Thomas, right? So when you guys are working together, how does that work for
Yeah.
you?
Kate Thomas and Benjamin Halstead, who I wrote Heartbreakers with,
Mm-hmm.
they both went to the musical theater writing program. So we met. Kate and I were in the same class. We did our thesis musical together. Ben was in the year behind me, and we just admired each other's work from afar, and then started working together years later. And that was honestly one of the main reasons I wanted to go to the program, was because I wanted to also make sure that I wasn't just writing standalone songs, because I'm really good at that. I'm good at telling a whole story in a 3.5, 4 minute song, give you the full
Mm-hmm.
arc and everything. But I think there's also such a satisfying feeling to getting a whole story, a whole book show where the song is doing one little piece of the bigger puzzle, and
Mm-hmm.
and building motifs that grow and expand and get interpolated and all of that kind of stuff. So I wanted to make sure I could find collaborators, especially book writers, who I could go on that journey with. And at the program, you do go as a words person or a composer. So
Mm-hmm.
I was, and predominantly am a composer lyricist. In the program, I was just a composer,
Mm-hmm.
and the reason I said that was because they asked me, and they were like, "Well, if you could be here for one or the other, what would you be?" And I was like, "Well, honestly, it would be harder for me to listen to a song I wrote where I didn't have control over the melody."
Uh-huh.
So yeah, and
In that collaboration, is it more that like, so does the book writer say, I need this song to do X in order to further the story? Or are you two, is there a little bit of push back and forth of, I think this character might want, like, do you as the composer have that kind of ownership over, I would love to push this character in this direction because the music I'm writing is doing that. And then the book writer says, oh, let me take that in and shift it. Or is one leading more than the other in general in your collaboration?
it's both. I mean, there have been times where I in these collaborations, I like it when my co-writers generate a little bit of lyrical content first, so that I
Mm-hmm.
can see, all right, what does this feel like for me? And what's been really great about working with um, lyricists is that it actually challenges me to go outside of my musical world. I I live in a very distinct Joey Contreras sound, but when
Mm-hmm.
you hear me with other writers, I think you still hear, of course, a thread of me. How could
Mm-hmm.
you not? But I'm going to kind of weirder places structurally, harmonically, mainly because they're writing in sort of different patterns than I would write. And I know that, like, if I really don't like it, or if it's not working, of course I'll say something. But I
Uh-huh.
also don't want to say it's not working just because it's not the way I would write. You
So
get
you mean literally like the poetic meter of their writing
me?
might be a little different than how you're gonna na 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 na, and so then you're gonna have to shift it or adjust to go. Given what you've done, this is really complex, thick, meter. I've got to change my musical styling to it. Is that what you're sort of saying?
Yeah, basically. And then if if I start coming up with a musical, if I start coming up with music that takes a little bit of what they've written, but then starts to go in a different direction, then I can kind of bring that back to them. Like, actually, I could really use this sort of
Uh-huh.
pattern or this sort of syllable with the emphasis
Right.
on here. So can
And
you
you
adjust
edit the text.
the
Yeah, yeah.
sentiment of this lyric and kind of now tweak it to this? And then it becomes that. And so
Hmm.
they bake, I bake, we bake
Hmm.
together.
So cool. So
Yeah.
cool. That was fun to hear about. What about as a beautiful singer yourself, which we've gotten little examples of today? How do you navigate that choice of when to record your stuff yourself versus, especially now you have, real clout in terms of some of the people you're able to bring in to record your material? Is that a conversation with yourself of going, oh, I could get this person to do it, but also I sound really good doing it? Like, when do you feel it's right to go, let me put myself forward versus bringing in a different voice to do your music?
Yeah, that's been a journey. Because I grew up singing my entire life. And somewhere along the way, the more you start to work with people that are really fantastic singers and who also just have undeniable tone, because that's one of the things that I love so much, just a good tone. It is interesting how I've kind of started to fade in the background of my music, and it was something that was a little emotional for me, because I just was like, here are all these songs that I've written that I used to sing and perform and all these things, and now I don't even feel comfortable singing them because I know they can be sung better by someone else. And so I kind of was reclaiming some of that for myself when I released my EP Joyride in 2019, where I said it was all me, because I felt like these songs were just so much my story that even though I know a handful of other people would have sounded so great on it, I felt like just for myself, I needed to do it. But I also, what's really important about my career, I think anybody's career, but and it's the reason why collaborations are so popular, and whether it be a YouTuber, a creator, a TikTok, that's why I think TikTok is so amazing, because of the duet functions and features and everything. But, if I have someone on one of my songs, there's more eyes and ears on it. And that's what I want. I want the most eyes and ears on my music.
It makes so much sense. It's interesting because I feel like it's not always the best voice that's going to, and you have a fantastic voice too. An amateur, I'm like, your voice sounds just as good as any of their other voices too. But when I listen to pop music, I love listening to like Paul Simon, and who's not the best technical singer, but I don't know that I would want a different voice on some of his music. It's like that's his story, that's his song, and he sounds great on it. I'm not always convinced that the whatever, if we could pick an aesthetically perfect voice, that is always the right song, tone for that song. It's always the right, interpreter, I guess, of that song.
8 out of 10 times, I don't like it when someone else sings a Britney song. And I wouldn't say, not many people would say Britney's an incredible vocalist.
Yes.
But I'd rather hear Britney sing a Britney song than anybody else.
That's so true. That's so true. What about, tell me a little bit about starting a musical from scratch. So, especially I think a lot of our actors and maybe parents of actors will have a sense of kind of how it happens at some of the big stages. But if you don't mind a little bit technically, from those first writing it put onto a page to actually getting a production, what are the big checkpoints, and how does that work, especially from your angle as a composer, right? Or as a composer and lyricist, how does it feel like it gets from here, and then there's waiting to what, and then waiting to what, and then where do you sort of come in the different stages of production?
That's a tough question, because I find myself still on that. I haven't mastered it yet. I haven't mastered getting to the production side of things, getting a show fully funded and all of that. It really does take a lot of work, a lot of time, knowing the right people and luck and all of those things. But if we're going to kind of just strip away all of those parts of it, when you're staring at the blank page, I think the most important thing first is to outline what story you want to tell, and figure out, okay, just ask yourself a lot of questions. What kind of story is this? What is this story? What is, how big is this story? And then once you kind of land on that, and also figure out, is it original? Is it being adapted from something? Is it all of that? And then once you get to that point, I would say that if you are working with a book writer, if it's just a book writer, then there's a music and lyrics team, or if it's, whatever the team is, I think it's important to get a bit of the book, the bad play version of it written a little bit, so that you can just see it and kind of start walking through it, literally like you're playing a video game, and you're or getting into the characters.
And this is still a first reading without necessarily bringing actors in yet. This is just you guys.
Yeah, this is just us trying to get stuff on a page. And then once you kind of get a little bit of that figured out, I'm not saying you need to take it from the beginning to the end. I think maybe if there's parts of it that you feel excited about, that feel like good entry points, that feel like, okay, maybe the book writer needs this to kind of discover the characters and how they talk. The lyricist, if it's a book writer lyricist, they need to figure out how they talk. And then once you kind of find a song moment, that's the first time you get to explore, what do these characters sound like? What does the show sound like? Because you can talk and talk and talk and say, well, I want it to sound like this and I want it to sound like that, but you won't really know until you start doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you write a song or three or four, I would say, then you start to like kind of learn, okay, more about the show. I have a show, Forget Me Not, where we wrote, it's an original tale. It's big and beautiful and magical and heartbreaking and lush. And this is a tale about it's a story about a coastal town that's kind of been forgotten and gets a burst of new attention when a whale washes ashore. It's in the 90s, and everyone's like, there's a whale washed ashore, but all this media comes. But what we don't know is that this town has been dealing with a lot of trauma and grief from a serial killer case that had happened there 10 years prior. So that's a lot of stuff to unpack, a lot of stuff to learn. That's like, you're talking about the present day and you're also talking about the past, So Kate, my co-writer in that, she had to write basically the like book one of what happened then, book two, what's happening here. And then we found, okay, some really crucial reveals and musicalized that to see what that sounded like. And then the biggest kind of like eye-opening experience for me was actually writing an overture. And you would think that an overture is kind of taking from the themes that you've already written and now you're kind of retroactively putting them in there. But I wrote this overture to explore the colors and the motifs that then, as we continued, I would play around and twist and kind of utilize in ways to create the themes for these characters, and that was so unlike anything I had done before, but it was so effective and so needed for me to learn the language of the piece.
It's so cool. And at what point do you bring in, the equivalent of a director or something? Do you bring someone in who then is going to go, wait, that's good, but I would reveal this, not here. Like, obviously some of that the playwright can do, or the book writer. But do you bring in? Yeah, certainly you bring in actors at some point too. But is there another voice? Is there some mentor figure, a director figure, a dramaturg-like figure, depending how you want to call it, that's helping you with that kind of stuff?
Yeah, about a year into, we had our first reading with actors and everything. We did the first act. We did 29-hour of the first act. And
that's a 29-hour reading is what you're saying.
29-hour reading.
You have 29 hours of work with actors and other people of total time, right?
Yes. And we had started working with a director, maybe a couple months leading up to it, just kind of like to get her into the piece. And it was great to have kind of, a different set of eyes and a different brain in the room. And she has since, she directed that. She has since been with us all the way. She's very much a collaborator. She's very much been so embedded in the fabric of us, all the different iterations of this piece. She's been there for it, which has been so helpful because, when you're in it, you start to not know, you start to become unbiased, but your brain has artifacts of the past. You don't know sometimes at that point. You're like, I know that this person has this, and this, and that we've said this, and this. But you might be thinking of a last draft, and now they're not saying all that anymore, and now the audience isn't getting that material, but you think the material's in there because you're like living in. So it's a lot of that kind of.
It feels like a really delicate balance of, you need an outside eye, and you maybe need someone to lead that process, especially if there's two of you collaborating, but you don't want to fully give up your ownership of your process, and you don't necessarily want too much feedback. Sometimes I feel like musicals get so much feedback so early where you're like, okay, now I'm fixing 7 different notes and just creating different problems by going, this person said this, and so I'm shifting that direction, but now the other note doesn't make sense because of the shift that we've made. Like that, it feels difficult of how do you streamline the amount of feedback you're getting
Yeah.
as you continue to collaborate.
Yeah, and we definitely have run into that a lot with this show, because a lot of people people start to latch on to certain characters,
Mm-hmm.
and then you start to either write more for that character,
Mm-hmm.
or you start to adjust. But the more you adjust, if you pull a string, other things start to fall
Mm-hmm.
apart. And so you do have to really remind yourself, okay, what is the story that I'm
Yes.
telling?
Yeah.
What is the story that I'm telling? Because if you have too many people saying this or wanting that, you start writing something that you never sought out to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's weird when you're like, because I've found myself in this situation where suddenly I'm like defending a show that I didn't mean
Uh-huh.
right.
Uh-huh.
You
It's
know
so
what I
true.
mean? It's
So,
very interesting. So
and I feel like especially actors are guilty of that. I mean, actors think are great collaborators. They have lots of great ideas. What if my character went in this direction? But it's never going to be what if my character said or sang less. It's never going to be like, oh, actually, I don't need that. We don't need to know this much about my character, right? So then it's easy as that starts, you get more voices going.
yeah,
And maybe you fall in love with an actor. You go, God, I wish there was more for this person because of the actor, but it's not necessarily for my story, the character that I actually want to spend another 3 songs on, even though that person should totally sing 3 more songs.
Mhm.
Difficult.
Mhm. Yeah.
Uh, let's talk a little bit. Megan is just dying to hear this question, which I just want to talk a little bit about the difference between MT and pop style as you see it these days, right? Obviously, like pop and MT are now inextricably woven together. That's not a new thing. Maybe it was as you were graduating from school, it was becoming more and more true. But certainly now, our students would know, like, you're auditioning for musical theater, you got to be ready to sing some pop. That's going to exist. But just as we talk about it stylistically, what do you think makes something an MT sound versus a pop sound in 2022?
I think, well, in 2022, because 2022 pop is very different. I think musical theater's version of pop is still Alanis Morissette.
Mm-hmm.
It's not 2022 pop. It's not Billie
It's
Eilish.
90s and 2000 pop is musical theater pop.
2000s, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so I don't know if we're gonna go in a like I don't know where we're gonna go pop wise. I think pop though, I think the interesting thing about the difference between musical theater and pop really comes down to the storytelling component of it. Pop music tends to be not so active, and musical theater needs to be active.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're um, so I would say that when especially in like audition settings too now, where everyone's like, you bring in a pop song, bring in a pop song. Don't bring in a contemporary musical theater song. Bring in
Mm-hmm.
a true pop song, because there is a difference between that. And I'm
But
trying
and
to,
are you saying specifically for advice, like don't bring in Smiling from Jagged Little Pill? Or don't bring in Tom Kitt's arrangement? You mean bring in the original arrangement,
also
or is that okay? So.
I think that's also a tricky thing, because now we're having more and more jukebox shows.
Uh-huh.
And so I don't know. And that's why I don't think jukebox shows are that great usually at the end of the day, because I think that you're taking songs that weren't never meant to do certain things, and now you're working things to make it do heavy lifting. And Tom Kitt's arrangements are unbelievable. And
Mm-hmm.
the way he made that show sound cohesive, he made it sound like a cohesive score
Mm-hmm.
with his arrangements. And you have Alanis Morissette, who already is a much more storytelling, more active,
Right.
is rooted.
You Ought to Know is written as
Sure.
almost like could be a musical theater song, right? In terms of the storytelling that's going on.
Right. It's rooted in, that's why the country and musical theater feel a lot more closely
Mm-hmm.
aligned,
Mm-hmm.
Um, but, if you're taking something like Moulin Rouge or Anne Juliet,
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's a different kind of experience.
It's so true. I'm like, it's so, I'm now making all these connections of how old, I never realized, oh yeah, MT pop is like 20 years old. I'm like, Hamilton, of course, is like old rap. Like, that's not what rap sounds like now.
Right.
But it is kind of what, like, old school, like when I was growing up, that was the rap that you would hear. It was like Fresh Prince style rap almost.
Yeah. And so I'm not saying that, like, I mean, I live for that stuff. Like, I know that I live that, like, Michael Jackson's Strange Loop, for example, that he loves Liz Phair. Like, I love Liz Phair. But Liz Phair is like, and I feel like the like audience would be like, Liz Phair, musical, that's pop on theater. And like, but that's, Liz Phair is not, I don't know, it's just, it's like, Liz Phair is not current right now. So
Meghan, did we successfully answer your question? I feel like I asked a slightly different question, and I want you to get in the question that you have, because I'm sure it was relevant.
but were you asking from like the writing perspective?
I was more asking about like the acting perspective. You coming from your background, from like your musical theater degree, how do you feel about people going into auditions or like going into a show that has, should you approach a pop song with, your MT acting chops, or should you go in there with that, like that vibe, or does it matter? Like, is it a per case scenario type thing?
Of course, everything is case by case, and read the room and read the breakdown and all of that stuff. Know what you're doing, know what you're auditioning for, all of that. But I would say for me, for someone who's a big pop music fan, and if I'm sitting behind the table and you come in with a pop song, I don't want to see you being like, I want you to, my taste is simplicity. I like it simple, I like it committed, and I don't like it overly, as we would say in in my college, dingy. Like there'd be like ding moments where it's like a new discovery there and a new discovery there and a new, ding, 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 all that stuff. And that's fun for a musical theater song that has those dings built into it, because those are written in there. Every punctuation mark, all those things are so intentional. But in pop music, it's treated a little differently, and I would rather see you like feel the song in a vibey way than being like, so like the text. Like, there's nothing worse than seeing someone act a Shawn Mendes song for me.
Act, and then therefore also pronounce. It feels like sometimes it's seen in the popping the P's and really hitting the end, and you're like, okay, that's not quite what that thing sounds like actually.
Yeah.
So I like dingy. That's a funny phrase.
That is a
lot of dings
phrase
happening. Tell us a little bit about writing for Disney. So are you allowed to tell us details of what you did and what that collaboration was like? I'm sure that's, a pretty exciting, remunerative process.
That was a really exciting project for me. It's Disney, so of course that's exciting. I think what I learned, and it was an animated piece, so I got to really see how my music had to adjust to what was happening visually, and they had a boardomatic, is that what they call it? Where it's basically like a storyboard, then it was like animated storyboard, and so just to kind of go with them step by step with the animators on that process was really great. And also the kind of like back and forth, the feedback, you're like, I was like eager to please, for them. But it was very, very collaborative, and also pretty, I don't know, it was actually a very lovely experience.
And all digital, maybe back and forth of they're sending you slides and then you're writing some stuff and then all that feedback's happening digitally?
Yeah.
Super cool. Okay, let's get to our game. We're going to play a version of Name That Tune with you, where we're going to test your musical chops. You may or may not have had the coffee, but you had the time to slowly wake up. So we'll see how we do. I'm really going to pass this over to Meghan, and I'm going to try to play along myself. You're going to get the first answer, but I'm going to see if I could get it. Meghan's going to take us through. You're going to get very short clips.
Oh, no.
All right, Meghan, it's all yours.
Great. Well, you've been known as the Broadway crossover extraordinaire, so we're really testing your knowledge here. But hopefully I've curated a list that will be somewhat easier for the 3-second requirement. Are you ready?
I feel like that clip of Kelly Clarkson and Anne Hathaway, where Kelly Clarkson doesn't hear Since You've Been Gone first, Anne Hathaway hears it. I feel like, so I'm just going to say, if I screw this up, Kelly Clarkson messes up too.
She did it first.
It's coming.
Contreras
that moment is coming. I'm going to jump in. No, I'm not going to jump in on any of them. I'm going to let you do them all first, but we'll see. We'll see
okay.
how it goes.
We're starting off easy.
Toxic.
Well, that was about half a second. Half a second, he knew it immediately. Okay, great. That was just a warm up, though. Okay, you were talking about Britney Spears.
Killing it so far.
Love the song.
Pretty good.
Pretty
Under a
good.
second still. Listeners.
All for you, Janet Jackson.
Killing it.
Wow. Okay, we have to make these harder, Megan.
I Want It That Way, Backstreet Boys.
Killing it.
Wow.
Billie Jean, Michael Jackson.
Wow. I would have gotten Michael Jackson. I would not have gotten the title there.
Okay.
Damn.
Wait.
Oh, I know it.
What? Wait.
Charlie should know this. You want to buzz in, Charlie?
No, I'm going to let Joey go for it. Yeah.
I literally can hear. Oh, no. What is it? Say it.
This is Little Miss Perfect, right?
It is.
For sure.
For sure. Got you there.
I'm leaning in to hear, even though I have headphones on, but I'm so excited to hear.
Oh. Is it Quiet? Is it Natalie Weiss?
Got it.
Wow. Joey.
I'm so much better at Legally Blonde.
Got it.
Wow.
Charlie, are you just doing this to make me feel good?
No, I'm letting you in first. I'm letting you in first on all of them. That's true. That is true. I would have known that for sure. No, yeah, for sure. It's your game. I'm just enjoying.
Love Me Not. Acoustic duet version.
Oh.
Killing it. His own.
I wanted you to miss your own. That's what I wanted. Oh.
Is Darren Hansen?
Well, you're in the vein.
Oh, is it Ben Justin?
It's Ben Platt.
Oh, is it Grows? Is it Grows?
You killed it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Let's do one last one, shall we? And this might be more for Charlie.
Uh-oh.
Hey now.
It's not for Charlie. Let's be clear.
Wait, hold on. Is that I know this is so bad. This is so bad. Is it Hilary Duff?
Yes.
Is it Lizzie McGuire movie?
Yes.
Okay.
Wait, why is that bad? That's amazing that you knew that.
It's great. I put that in there for Charlie because one of his transition is Hey Now. And for like 6 months, I've been singing this song in the background. And I have not recently, but I was like, oh, Charlie just doesn't know this song. And I've just been replaying this joke for months. And he's like, yeah, okay. Yeah, I get it, Megan.
I was like, what is the joke about me and Hilary Duff? I'm like, oh, is there something I don't know?
Joey, you killed that game of Name That Tune.
That was amazing. Was that like 11 for 12 or something? That
was very good.
And the only ones you didn't get were ones with zero lyric, like when it was only a tiny bit of music or whatever.
But you did know it.
I literally, I could only be like, I was like, dun, 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 dun. And I was like, I can literally sing that 2-bar.
A 2-bar cut. That's truly a superpower. I mean, that is really amazing.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit. We'll just a couple more questions before we let you go. That I'd love to talk about. We've mentioned social media, and I feel like some of our artists, they've talked about it as a necessity. Some have talked about it like it's optional, and that some of that is given where they are in their careers and exactly what they're trying to do. It seems from the outside like a pretty necessary evil for a young composer trying to get their work out there, especially when you're counting platforms like YouTube and stuff like that. But I just love to hear about, how do you use it? How do you navigate its waters? Whether it's from a TikTok to an Instagram to a YouTube, talk me through all of your kind of relationship with the social medias.
Yeah, I mean, my career was built on social media very early on with YouTube and putting out a lot of videos. The important thing for me as a musical theater writer is eyes, ears, exposure, and then also people singing my music. So I always tell people that if you want to support your, musical theater writers, definitely purchase their sheet music, because that is like their merch and it is the way that they, support themselves. And so that those kinds of parts of social media are really important for me. It's the shares, the likes, the covers, all of that stuff. That kind of interacting with the community and the audience is not only a lot of fun, but it is essential to my career. And then as, more and more platforms have popped up, I mean, it does get a little overwhelming, and I'm still trying to find my footing with TikTok, mainly because, it's like, it feels like such a big sea of constant content creation.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's cool. It's just a different way of thinking, because now you're thinking much like how, I mean, TikTok has had such an effect on everybody, music,
Mm-hmm.
theater, a lot of industries, but, mine being music and theater, like, you know, music, the song gets shorter and shorter and shorter. TikTok is also an example of that and influencing that. And with, theater stuff, it's like, you can gain a lot of popularity if you have a good 45-second minute clip
Mm-hmm.
of something. And so it's a different way of thinking. And I think you need both. It's not like one's going to replace the other, because you also have situations where it's like Driver's License was a 4.5 minute song, and it was
Mm-hmm.
the biggest song of the year. And I think just because you have something that can like be trend, can go viral, doesn't mean that now all of your songs and musical theater score of a show can have to be, or can only be, a 90-second little blip or a little catchy nugget or something. I think we're still going to want to feel a larger picture and stuff. So, but what's helpful about TikTok is that it gives you the audience to provide the path to do the other things.
And for your brain, are you like splitting your strategy? If you have kind of a personal social media strategy, are you thinking about what I put on TikTok is going to be different than what I put on Instagram, is different than Twitter, is different? Are you on all the platforms and kind of curating your music, or curating what you put out there as different stuff? Or is it more like I'm for TikTok and then I just share that on everything else?
I think
Yeah.
you need to be, there's a little bit of acceptance with crossover TikTok, Instagram content, but I still like people to feel like they are getting something different and exclusive depending on what platform they follow me on. So if you follow me on TikTok, you're going to get a lot more of, honestly, what I've been really enjoying doing. And it's kind of vulnerable, because I don't tend to let people in on so much of my process, or like,
Mhm.
I have so many songs that I've written that have never been released. But now I'm kind of like, you know what? Let me just drop stuff there. Let me just sing a verse chorus of something and just put it there and feel and lower the stakes a little bit. And if people see it, amazing. And if people like it, even better. And if no one sees it, no one sees it.
Mhm.
But I think that there's probably a bigger strategy that some other strategists would tell you to do. But what I do is still very different. I'm not a singer-songwriter. I'm not a pop artist. I'm not someone that's trying to get you to, and I'm kind of doing a lot of things. I'm
Mhm.
writing musical theater scores. I am releasing albums. I do want you to pre-save and to stream that. Streams are important, but I also want you to license my shows. I also want
Mhm.
producers to know my shows exist, to put them on on Broadway, and so
Mhm.
we're all kind of seeing who's influencing each other. And I think that people overall are finding their audiences, and and they all can kind of help each other. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I think for a long time, I was told very early on in my career that even though I had all of these fans, the people that kind of could make the like moves in my career, like the agents and the producers,
Mhm.
they were like, yeah, but we don't know what to do with you because you don't have like a traditional book show that I can
Mhm.
just like go down that one path, kind of going back to what we talked about earlier,
Mhm.
paths. Now, I think people that have the ability to invest in things, put money places, make things happen, all of these things are listening a little bit more to what the audience is saying versus them just saying, this is what you're doing and this is what you're listening to.
Totally. Yeah. So
So
true.
that's kind of,
You mentioned a little, you sort of flashed on 2022 specifically when I threw it out there in the pop and MT question. I guess I just would love to hear, sort of post pandemic or coming out of the pandemic, or wherever we are now in 2022. How do you feel like this industry both pop and musical theater has changed, is changing? Where do you feel like we're going in the next couple of years? Do you see us a direction and new possibilities opening up, or things that were possible closing down? Or I'd love to kind of hear where you think we are.
I think everybody is really wanting to shake things up. I I think the foundations are being shaken up, and I think that we're going to. What I would like to see is I would like to see more musical theater writers writing on a commercial level.
Hmm.
I'd like to see that. I would like to see more trust in the success of that. And I also think that we're going to continue seeing a lot more hybrid, multimedia, interactive content. And I think that's, I think that there's also why I said that everyone's like wanting it. I do think that there are other people that are a little overwhelmed by it. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that we're just gonna, it's gonna be, I don't know, it's gonna be kind of exciting and crazy. I think
Give me an example of interactive. What do you mean by interactive content?
I don't know if you've read much about like the metaverse. That's kind of like the inevitable metaverse that's happening.
Yes.
But I
We'll
think
buy houses, theoretically. People are going to buy houses in the metaverse and pay tons of money, so they say.
right, and I think that there's a lot of think pieces about it. There's a lot of pros and cons, and I agree. There's lots of pros and cons. I mean, I sometimes I'm like, wow, I can't believe when I moved to New York, I didn't have Google Maps. I didn't have a smartphone.
Yeah.
Like, I was printing out MapQuest directions to walk around the city, and now here we are talking about metaverses. So like, but I think that that it is inevitable, and it's going to ultimately create hopefully a bigger sustainable career path for more creators, because they will be able to locate their audiences and kind of create what I would say is a working class artist, so that you're not just where it's not just the like 7 or 8 writers that we all know who's writing on Broadway and who's writing for film and television, that there will be other sustainable paths for people.
So like an interactive piece of music would be like a concert that's happening inside of Halo or something. That you win the game of Halo and you get a special, I don't know how Halo works, I've never played it, but that idea of you're talking about a digital interactive artistic experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're freaking me out here, Joe. You're freaking me out, and I'm into it. My last question for you, and then we'll let you go, is just I'd love to talk about if you have any advice, either for a young artist today who's thinking of dabbling in composition, or at least exploring this path, what that would be, and kind of bonus points if you also want to give advice to a parent of such a young artist, for our parent listeners. So as you think about a young Joey and what you wish you had heard when you were 17, what would it be?
I would say that first, go to a place that you feel like you can be your authentic self and feel safe and to be who you are, because that's number one important. You want to be able to be who you are, experience life. If you're into music, if you're into theater, amazing, great. Let that become 98% of your personality, but allow yourself to also experience other things. And so there is that. I also, I would like, people, and I would like the kids to know that what you decide to go on, what you decide to do at this point in time can define you for a certain period of time, and that's okay, and that's great and amazing, and keep on pursuing it. But to also remain open-minded to the idea that maybe what you originally wanted when you were 16 might not be what you wanted when you're 18, 19, 20, 45, and to give yourself that grace to to release yourself of that person. You're not disappointing your previous self. You're not, you're just releasing whatever that was and going on the next path that will provide you whatever the joy you need or whatever's missing. So that's really important to know. And I know that that's something that 16 or 17-year-olds might hear and be like, okay. But like, it's something that is important to hold on to, remember.
It's so true. And any bonus points for stuff that your parents did really well as supportive parents, or things that maybe you wish, I wish you just had done this?
Listen, be supportive, and be encouraging. I mean, it's actually, I mean, you're is it a new parent? You're a new parent?
Yeah. Brand new daddy. Yeah.
So
I'm just trying to get the advice for myself. What do I do? How do I help?
I can't say too much other than what I was lucky to have was my mom was there to listen on the phone with me at 2 a.m. in the morning when I was crying in a Wawa. So, it's that kind of stuff.
I love it. Anything we know, if we're following you, we can do at Joey Contreras. This is on all the socials. Anything that we need to plug, of places we should be checking you out, either digitally or live?
Well, if this is coming out before April 18th, I'm doing a concert at 54 Below, which is a really exciting night for me. I'm going to be kind of basically premiering a bunch of new music from all 3 shows that are currently in development: Heartbreakers in Hell, Forget Me Not, and In Pieces. Then I am, always constantly releasing music and trying to get to the next step of wherever I am meant to be. So
I really like something Joey said, which is something that we echo at MTCA. So for any of you out here who are not MTCA students, that idea of, if there's a living composer and you want to sing their music, please purchase their sheet music as opposed to pirating it. That idea of how that is so supportive. We have a lot of friends and collaborators who are composers as well, and I know that's a big part of the way you can support them. So please, you can go to joeycontreras.com and buy some sheet music if you dig some stuff, if you want to sing it.
Yes.
Joey, thanks so much for your time on the pod. It was so great having you.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun. And now I'm going to get coffee.
Yes. Hey now. Getting to hear Joey as much as Meghan and I enjoyed chatting with him. Maybe it was him being a little undercaffeinated, but I found him to be so grounded and intelligent, and he had some really keen insight on the biz. I just want to expand a little bit on what he talked about with like putting 98% of yourself into this, but not 100%. Now, I don't know if I want to co-sign that exact percentage. That still seems a little high to me. But I do think it is so important that we as artists don't ever fully become our work. Now, whether that relates to the college process, and here it would be like where you get into school does not define who you are, which we know from years and years of doing this that is true. Or if it's while you're in school, it's easy for it to become your entire life is just the time you're spending in that conservatory. Or maybe especially I'll talk toward those early career auditioners. And you get out of school and it's just so easy from 22 to 26 or 27, where a lot of our listeners are, to sort of become your jobs, become your auditions. I find it is a tide I have to actively swim against to prevent that from happening. It is very easy as that young career artist to like have a friend say, "Hey, Charlie, how's it going?" And I immediately just give them a full progress report on all my auditions, what work I have coming up, what I didn't quite book, but what I should have booked, instead of just answering the question of how am I doing, right? That kind of pouring all of yourself into your work is harmful in so many ways. It certainly is not going to be good for your social life because nobody's going to want to hang around that kind of person. But it also becomes unsustainable for your actual life and therefore harms your art as well. I mean, there will definitely be times when your art and your work is a huge percentage of your life. Maybe I'd say let's try to cap it out at 90 and not 98. But then you have to actively work to rebalance and find how other things in your life can sustain and feed you. And in a larger sense, you're going to miss out on opportunities to inform your work. So much of what makes artists interesting is how they pull stuff from their personal life into their art. So their craft is informed by something and isn't just craft for craft's sake. Of course, like so many things, it's also about finding that balance. We talked about that a bit in Annalee's episode, right? And you don't want to feed your other aspects of life so much that you aren't giving that hunger and drive for the difficulties of this business. So I wouldn't want your art ever to be less than 10% of your life or whatever as you're finding that balance. But here, when I'm talking about percentages, I think the more important point, it's less about how much time you're spending on something, that's a different conversation, and we can talk about that too. But what I'm really talking about is kind of your view of yourself emotionally. And I think that's what Joey was saying too, when he's saying 98% of yourself and sort of who you are. If anyone's watching The Dropout, which I highly recommend, Elizabeth and I are about halfway through, one of the big turning points is that Elizabeth Holmes, the other Elizabeth, goes from saying Theranos is what I do, it's not who I am. She says that in like one episode, and then like the next episode says, I am Theranos. Anybody who doubts the company doubts me. And that switch to say that I am my work is almost always an unhealthy one. One of the reasons I love the analogy of you're the CEO of your own company as an artist, there's many reasons that analogy really works, but one of my favorites is that there's then necessarily a firewall between you and the company, right? When you give all of your artistic greatness to an audition and get rejected, that director is saying no to what your company is offering to sell. They're not saying no to you as a human being. They're saying, no, we're not interested in a contract with your company. It always feels to me, it always feels like the latter is what's happening, that they're rejecting me as a human being. So whatever you can do to actively create that emotional separation for yourself is so helpful. It's a bit like what we talked about in Vicky's episode. I think it was episode 1 or episode 2. I forget which one we labeled it as. 2 is number 2. About whatever you can do, to sort of realize it's a business. It's not personal, right? Even though, of course, it is incredibly personal. We know that it's true. So whatever you can try to do for yourself emotionally, so that you can put all of your soul into your art, whether it's music, acting, etc., but not have your art be the entirety of what your soul is comprised of. And ideally, I think a lot less than 90%. So the statement, I'm 100% an actor, can be true, but also true can be, I'm a mother and a painter and I'm a puzzle solving fiend and I love to crochet, right? It's a lot easier said than done to find that balance, but that is the goal, that you want to feel like you can put the full truth of who you are as a human being into your work, but not have your work be all you are as a human being. If you enjoyed 98% of this episode and you want to hear more, please hit that follow button. We'd also appreciate you if you were to rate and review us wherever you find us. I suggest 5 stars if you listen to these pods under-caffeinated, and an ironic 5 stars if you're already on your 3rd cup, like me. You can also reach out to us with questions for the pod at mailbag@mappingthecollegeaudition.com, or check us out on the social medias. If you're interested in working with MTCA for help with your individual prep for your college audition journey, please check us out at mtcollegeauditions.com. You can also follow the company, which we have a separation between ourselves and our company, just like Joey suggested, on our socials. They're linked in our show notes. To my young artists out there mapping their journeys, whatever you do, don't get too dingy. We'll see you next week.